All set.
All right, so welcome everybody to the July 14th Complete Streets Commission meeting. This is a teleconference meeting with commissioners, city staff, and members of the public participating remotely to ensure proper social distancing in this federal and state and local emergency. So to introduce the commission members and staff present, I'm Chair Azina Levin. Commissioners present include Brian Altman, Jackie Sebrian, Sally Cole, and John Cromie. And absent for now, it includes J.K. Jensen, who might arrive, and Katie Bruzzi, Elizabeth King, and Leah Lee, who are absent. And staff present include Kevin Chen and Patrick Palmer. Patrick, will you please roll the instructions for the commissioners and members of the public on how the meeting will proceed?
Yes, thank you, Chair Levin and members of the Complete Streets Commission. Welcome everyone to the July 14th Complete Streets Commission meeting, and thank you for attending. At this time, we ask that the members of the commission please remain on screen for the duration of the meeting. You will be able to control your webcams and microphones. Staff will engage webcams and microphones to make presentations and respond to the members of the commission. Also, for members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, after the chair calls for public comment on the meeting on the item you wish to speak on, please engage the raised hand feature. I will then have the ability to open your microphone and you can provide your public comment to the Complete Streets Commission. And also for members of the public who are calling in from a landline or a cell phone, you can press *9 to raise your virtual hand. That concludes the instructions, and I return the meeting to the chair.
All right, thank you. And I also want to welcome Commissioner Jensen, who is also here, and move on to item C, reports and announcements, where staff and commission members may communicate general information of interest regarding matters within the jurisdiction of the commission. And no commission discussion or action can occur on any of these items. And Kevin, do you have any reports or announcements?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a few announcement items, so bear with me as I kind of walk them through line by line. So first and foremost, very excited to announce that the City Council has adopted a budget for this upcoming year. And of course, many of the elements, while are very much citywide, there are some transportation elements. So I will go ahead and itemize them briefly for the benefit of the Commission. So first and foremost, we did get the approval of one additional associate transportation engineer. So this is a position that was frozen, excuse me, due to COVID-19. And then with the adoption of the budget is now officially reopened. So with that, the next step is to proceed with recruitment for both the transportation engineer as well as the assistant public works director that was previously approved. So very exciting news for the transportation division, obviously. Also, the Safe Route to School program, there is now a budget. The budget has been restored to the pre-pandemic level. So another really good, exciting news for us. In addition, the City Council also is asking the Complete Street Commission to potentially conduct a review of the current state of the program. So this is something that we have a subcommittee for, and most likely would be a task that I'm sure the subcommittee would be more than happy to take it on. I think as we kind of continue on next couple of meetings, there will be a meeting about work plan items. It's going to be a good opportunity for us to evaluate what that means in terms of what we need to modify for our upcoming work plan. Excuse me. Also, with regard to the one that's dearest to our heart, the NTMP program, the city council has directed staff to, at the moment in time, put our focus on capital projects and also development reviews. So what that means is that the NTMP program is currently still on hold. However, with an eye toward the future, that we would reevaluate after staff, the transportation division is fully staffed. So what that means is what we're waiting for, essentially kind of the vacancies within the transportation division to be completely fulfilled first, and then we'll reevaluate the situation. Also, what that means, there is an idea about coming back to the Complete Street Commission for potentially evaluating or making some recommendation for the process to streamline the program. Of course, all of this is predicated to the review that is within later on this year. But again, there is some implication to the work plan as we currently stand. So we can talk about that a little bit more. And then, so that's basically the transportation-related items as it relates to the City Council adopted budget. And then also, in addition to that, I have two news that I wanted to, or one news I wanted to announce. This is regarding the Middle Avenue ped and bike crossing. So as many of you know, the project is a great project. However, city at this moment in time is still lacking a little bit of funding to move this project forward. So I'm happy to announce that with the federal infrastructure bill, Congresswoman Anna Eshoo has added our project to the request. And the request is in the form of approximately $6.5 million for the project. So if the bill gets passed successfully between both the House and the Senate, then obviously that would be tremendously good news for us. So fingers crossed for the city of Menlo Park. Finally, my last item is some of you might have noticed that there's recently a news article that got published by Palo Alto that mentioned a study for essentially kind of a bicycle superhighway. So I just want to provide a little bit of background because I did get some inquiries from a few commissioners. For those that are new to the commission, you might not notice, but all of this is stemmed from a partnership, which is called a Managers Mobility Partnership. This was a partnership that was established between the cities of Mountain View, Palo Alto, Menlo Park, and Redwood City. The partnership had essentially, amongst many other tasks and goals, obviously, was to establish potentially a bicycle facility that can connect all the cities and potentially beyond, but with the 4 cities in mind. And through that partnership, we were able to establish a temporary route, which was officialized with signs, utilizing existing facilities to connect the 4 cities. In addition to that, there was a money set aside for a study to look at what is a good permanent option to connect the bicycle facilities amongst the 4 cities. And that is the study that was being referenced in the news article. Essentially, the study is a very high-level study, which look at 3 potential options for that permanent infrastructure. And the options were essentially kind of middle field. For the city of Menlo Park, it will be middle field, El Camino, and also potentially using the Caltrain's right away. So the study ultimately, I think there's a recommendation for El Camino to be the final recommendation. It is still somewhat of a work in progress, but because there was a news article that was published, I thought I would update the commission in case that there's anyone that's interested. We can certainly follow up as well. So with that, I will conclude my announcements. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I see that Commissioner Cole's question.
Yeah, I have a question, Kevin. Can you, it was exciting to hear there may be funding at the federal level for something, I think you referred to at Middle Avenue, but can you describe what that project is?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is I would consider that one of the major key projects for the city. So in essence, it is a undercrossing across the railroad track. So that would be undercross the current existing Caltrain track. And the connections are essentially Burgess Park to approximately on the other side, Middle Avenue. Not quite to the Middle Avenue, but it really connects to the Middle Plaza development. So if you've driven down kind of El Camino near middle, you probably see a huge structure right now. So that's kind of the Middle Plaza project. So this is a undercrossing, a pedestrian / bicycle undercrossing connecting the Burgess Park to that plaza. Great. So essentially it'll be a new access for ped and bike, in addition to the current access which we have at Ravenswood and further up.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
All right. Any other questions before we move on? And I can't see everybody at exactly the same time. So.
I see a hand by Commissioner Altman.
Yeah. Hey Kevin, is that Middle Avenue project the same one in the TMP, which is Project 81? Is that, it says Middle Avenue Caltrain crossing?
I believe so. Give me a second to confirm that. I believe so, yes.
And if I read it right, that's $18 million, right, to implement that?
Yep. Yes.
And the funding was how much from SU?
6.5, which is approximately what we needed to complete the funding. Yeah.
So the other part of the funding is provided by the developers?
A mix of developer, local fund, and as well as kind of some of the other local grants that we have been able to procure. So it's a mixture of many different funding sources. Yeah.
Good question.
Any other questions before we move on? All right, I'm going to move to public comment, where under item D, general public comment, the public may address the Complete Streets Commission on any subject not listed on the agenda. Each speaker may address the commission once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. Please clearly state your name and address or political jurisdiction in which you live. The commission cannot act on items not listed on the agenda and therefore cannot respond to non-agendized items brought up under public comment other than to provide general information. So Patrick, is there anyone with a hand raised for public comment?
It does not look like it at this time.
Okay. Any member of the public, if you have a comment at any time for any agenda item, you can raise your hand using the hand raise feature of Zoom. So with that, we will move on to item E, regular business, where the commission considers recommendations from city staff on policy matters or administrative actions that require commission approval. E1 is to approve the Complete Streets regular meeting minutes of June 9th, 2021. And I actually have a tiny tweak for the minutes. Does anybody else have any other corrections for the minutes? And then I will share my tiny tweak, and then hopefully we can approve the minutes.
No, I have none.
Okay. My tiny tweak refers to the presentation that I'm going to give later in this meeting, which was referenced in the previous agenda where I first brought it up, and it's listed as Seamless Bay Area. So Seamless Bay Area is a nonprofit, and the Seamless Transit Principles is the initiative that I had talked about bringing forward. So please change Seamless Bay Area to Seamless Transit Principles.
Is there a process on that, or do we have to second your motion, or how does that work?
Yeah.
It's fine with me.
Okay, so as the chair, can I make the motion, or do I need somebody else to make the motion?
No, as the chair, you can make the motion.
Great. So I'll move approval of the minutes with that one tweet.
I will second the motion.
Great, thank you very much. So we have a motion, a first and a second. If I can have all the commissioners that would like to vote yes, please raise your hands. Great, awesome. Awesome, that's unanimous. Thank you very much.
All right. So next we are moving on to item 2, which is to adopt a resolution to install Redcurb on Marketplace and Terminal Avenue. And we will have Nick Yee, the Transportation Demand Management Coordinator, to introduce the item and make a presentation.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Nicholas Yee. I am the city's Transportation Demand Management Coordinator. For those who may not be familiar with myself, I wear a few hats with the city. So some of the roles I oversee our shuttle program, our Safe Routes to School program, and our Transportation Management Association feasibility study. But tonight I'll be coming to you with a proposal to install Redcurb along Terminal Avenue and Marketplace in Belhaven. So let me just pull up my presentation. Just give me one sec. Can you guys all see the presentation? Yes, no, yes. Okay, cool. Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, just trying to hide Zoom while doing a presentation. All right. Okay, so essentially, we're looking to install Redcurb and removing a few parking spaces on Marketplace and Terminal, which I'll go through in this presentation. So as a bit of a background, the reason why we need to have Redcurb installation is to facilitate the movement of our terminals for the Samtrans routes and shuttle routes that are impacted by construction on the Menlo Park Community Campus. So as a little background, there's 2 routes from Samtrans that serve the general area there. So Samtrans routes 81 and 281 both serve the Onetta Harris Community Center. The 281 actually lays over by Terminal and Del Norte right there. There's a little layover spot there that has a shelter. And then the 81 is a school tripper that runs during the AM and PM during the school year to accommodate students at Menlo Atherton High School. And then our City of Menlo Park Crosstown Shuttle served the senior center, and it would actually stop right in front of the senior center in that little parking lot area. And that's also where they would lay over the shuttle in between the different runs. So a little background for the Menlo Park Community Campus, or the MPCC. So essentially, it's a new facility consolidating the old senior center, the Onetta Harris Community Center, and also creating a new Belhaven branch library all on the same campus. So construction actually began back in June 2021 and is expected to last a couple years until about mid-2023. And as a consequence of that, it's actually impacted the Samtrans 281 and Crosstown shuttle operations due to construction and just site access in general. So to kind of give you a little overview of both the current layout and the future layout. So you can see here on the left is the current layout, or what was the current layout. So you can see that the Crosstown shuttle terminal is right there in front of the senior center in the parking lot there, kind of nestled in between the Onetta Harris Community Center and Kelly Park. And then the Samtrans terminal is further out by Terminal Avenue and Del Norte Avenue. But as you can see on the right, essentially the Crosstown shuttles terminal is going to disappear because the building's footprint will take the place of the parking lot. And just in general, even though the Samtrans terminal isn't really being impacted per se, it just will be impacted in general because of the access to the site for construction vehicles and all. So that's why they moved it in the best interest of the riders. So basically the changes that happened due to construction of the MPCC and the limited access to the parking lot is that Samtrans Route 281 and the Crosstown shuttle moved their terminals on June 28th, 2021. So the Route 281's new terminal is at Marketplace and Del Norte Avenue. So essentially it's the formerly second to last stop on the routes. It's approximately 500 feet from the Onetta Harris Community Center stop. And then as part of the route changes to accommodate the new terminal, essentially all the return trips to Stanford Shopping Center will take a one-way loop from that terminal at Market and Del Norte via Del Norte Avenue and Pierce Road in order to return back to its normal route at Newbridge Streets. As for the Crosstown shuttle, the new terminal is just outside at Terminal Avenue and Del Norte on the corner there. So it's still a way to offer close access to Belhaven residents, and it's theoretically close within walking distance of Kelly Park. But in order to facilitate these new layover areas, it necessitated no parking restrictions, which started on June 28th, where we actually laid out A-frames with posters stating the new parking restrictions. And essentially we need an adequate amount of curb space because Samtrans operates a 40-foot bus and our shuttles operate approximately a 30-foot bus. So we need enough clearance curbside in order to allow these vehicles to safely pull in and out of the layover area, and in order to pull curbside away from any moving traffic. So in order to facilitate the parking restrictions, we are requesting red curb installation for those no parking restrictions. So just to make it clear, these are both temporary requests. These are not permanent requests. So we just are having these being requested to be in place until the MPCC construction is completed in 2023. So for Marketplace and Del Norte Avenue for the Samtrans layover area, we're requesting 70 feet of red curb from the corner of the intersection to approximately where the driveway is for 205 Marketplace. For the crosstown shuttles layover area at Terminal and Del Norte Avenues, we're looking to request 40 foot of red curb that's in addition to existing 20 feet of curb. So essentially we'll have red curb from the corner to about the driveway for 150 Terminal Avenue. And there's a decent amount of red curb being requested here, 60 feet in particular, because we're trying to preserve sight distance for drivers in Del Norte. So since it's an unprotected intersection for drivers coming down Del Norte, say trying to make a left or right onto Terminal, since there's no stop sign, they would have to creep out. And if there was a shuttle blocking the way, it would block any sight distance. So we're requesting more distance on the red curb in order to push the shuttle forward so that it won't block any drivers for safety concerns. So
Sorry, I have a question, Nick.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, this is Sally. Thank you for the presentation. It's so clear and I really appreciate it. Can you go back to the slide before this one? I just want to ask a quick question.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think my question here was so far, no, I think it was the slide before this, apologies.
This one?
Yeah, so since you've had the no parking restrictions in place since June 28th, have you had any complaints or anything like that?
We haven't heard anything yet.
And is any of that, since you specified that the red curbs would be kind of a bit larger than typical, but I appreciate the reasons why. Have you had any like accessibility issues, or do you anticipate having any accessibility issues cropping up?
Accessibility in what sense?
Well, meaning that if people can't park there, is there adequate allowances for people with accessibility issues to park and be close enough to where they need to go?
I think there should be parking in the vicinity, and if it's theoretically a drop off, they could just use a red curb real quickly.
They can? Okay, didn't know that. Thank you.
Well, I mean, it's not official, but it's just they can use it just as a drop off if it's temporary, not necessarily for parking.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions before I continue? No? Okay. So for the neighborhood impacts, so essentially the red curb request will result in a total loss of 5 on-street parallel parking spots, both on Marketplace and Terminal Avenue. So this red curb installation and loss of on-street parking are necessary during the MPCC construction in order to best preserve the best accessibility to and from Belhaven, both on Samtrans and our crosstown shuttle. So it's kind of the trade-off there. But again, like I mentioned before, this goal is to have temporary red curb striping. So all the parking spots will revert back after we remove the red curb in 2023 when the MPCC campus opens. So essentially our recommendation is to adopt the resolution to install red curb and temporary removal of 5 on-street parallel parking spots or parking spaces on Marketplace and Terminal Avenue. That concludes my presentation. Are there any other further questions?
Nick, do you anticipate like any dissatisfaction from people who use this area and park in this area for the loss of the 5 spaces? Like, do you think that will be a difficulty?
I can't necessarily say if there's going to be a big pushback or not, but I'll say a few spots may impact the neighborhood, but hopefully a total amount of 5 spots in this area shouldn't be too bad of an impact. And theoretically, at least for Marketplace, there's always a Samtrans bus there every 30 minutes or so during the normal operational hours. So I like to think that that spot's already half used. It's not like it's always being used by cars, but Terminal may be impacting people who usually park there.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And I see that Commissioner Segreen has a hand.
I do. I mostly was commenting because I did ride by there to kind of look and see what it was all about and what impacts it looked like it was going to have. And it seemed to me like they were really logical places and they fit right into whatever was already going on. And like I know the one on the bottom, like at Terminal and Del Norte, like those two driveways belong to the same house. So like that stretch was already partially red and they have access points to like both of those driveways belong to the same house. So it didn't feel like a huge impact. And then the other one was also, I don't know, it's right in front of an apartment building, which I think also has available parking. So I did go by to look at it, make sure it looks.
Excellent. Thank you for that eyewitness report. Does anybody else have any more questions on this presentation? And I can't see everybody at the same time, so please use the Zoom feature to raise your hand if you have any questions. I see that Commissioner Cole has a hand.
Yeah, I just have one quick thing about communication. So when we do take when there's a temporary removal of 5 on-street parallel parking spaces, do we somehow communicate to the community that it's temporary?
So in our mailers, we said it was temporary. We basically mailed out mailers or postcards to people within about 500 feet radius of the impacted areas. And also on a sort of related note, on our posters for the no parking restrictions, we also listed information both about this commission meeting and also the 15-day appeal process.
Great. Thank you, Nick.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any more questions from commissioners? I don't have any. This looks very clear to me. And the fact that there have been no complaints since this has been in place for a couple weeks now is a good sign. Commissioner Cole, do you have a hand raised subsequently, or is that a legacy hand? Okay.
Sorry about that.
All right, cool, no problem. And so without additional hands from commissioners, I want to check if there are any comments from members of the public. A member of the public has a comment, feel free to raise your hand using the Zoom feature. And I am not seeing any comments from members of the public. So bringing it back to the commission, does anyone have a motion?
I'll move to approve, pass the recommendation. What am I doing, Kevin? Patrick? I move to that the Complete Streets approve the recommendation by staff for the increased Redcurb.
Yes, that's perfect.
I'll second.
I'll second it. Yep.
Okay, so for the record, I will have Commissioner Sibrian, the motion, and then a second by Vice Chair. I think I heard Vice Chair Cole first, so I'm going to go ahead and go with that. So with that being said, if I can have everyone raise your hands if you agree to the motion, if you're voting yes to the motion. So I am seeing all hand raised, so unanimous vote. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks to staff for that clear presentation and something that seemed like a sensible thing to do. So moving on in the agenda, item E3 is a presentation from the Multimodal Subcommittee, and I'm going to give a presentation. So I'm going to hand over to Vice Chair Cole for chairing while I present. And can I share my screen?
Yes.
Or how does it work with the presentation? I sent a PDF and I also have the identical thing on my screen. So how can
I think the chair, you're more than welcome to go ahead and share your screen and do the presentation. Hopefully on the bottom, do you see a share screen option? Oh, there we go. I believe I am now seeing your presentation. If you want to go ahead and make it a full screen, by all means.
Yep. Okay. Great.
Perfect.
And this presentation is something that I had talked about previously with Commissioner Cibrian on the Multimodal Subcommittee, and we talked about bringing this forward at this meeting. And this is about creating a rider-first seamless transit system. So what does that mean, and why is this relevant to the Complete Streets Commission? So Menlo Park, the city of Menlo Park has transportation goals and climate goals that depend on regional transit. We depend on regional transit to address congestion. We depend on it to reduce climate emissions by giving people less polluting alternatives to driving. But the challenge in achieving these goals is we don't control regional transit. So we have these goals that we cannot achieve on our own. And so the goal of bringing this is to talk about a way that as a city, we can influence these issues that we cannot control, but we can influence. So these challenges that we have as a city are not unique to Menlo Park. Public transportation in the Bay Area, even before COVID, was not overall keeping up with the region's growth. And a lot of people want to use public transit, but don't use it as much as they would like because it is challenging. It takes too long to get around. It's not as reliable as it should be. It's confusing. It is insufficiently frequent. That is not what I wanted to do. Here you want to look at the screen, not at the other things on my computer. And part of these challenges has to do with the structure of Bay Area public transportation. I don't know who has been following along enough to know that there are 27 different transit agencies in the Bay Area. This is pretty distinctively fragmented, and each of these transit agencies has separate fares, separate passes, schedules, wayfinding, signage, and that makes it take too long, and it's frustrating for users. And so, then the question is, well, like, what can be done about it? And there are many regions around the world that have taken on issues of fragmentation and addressed them and went from a more fragmented state to a more coordinated state. And based on studies of regions around the world, it is possible to have a seamless, customer-focused regional network that is strategically planned at a regional level to work as a system. Right now what we have is the system is planned in piece parts, not together. So there's one set of people who are working on the bus service across the bay, and there's another set of people that are working on the train service, and these services are not part of one planning process. And that's one of many examples of things that could be strategically planned at a regional level to work as a system. This doesn't mean that transit agencies go away poof, but it means that they would work together to operate different parts of an integrated network. So the thing that you see on this map, like, you don't see the logos. There might be different agencies under the hood, but for the rider, it works like one system with service quality and fares, discount schedules, and wayfinding signage to be standardized and reliable and simple for users. Another characteristic of integrated systems is having an integrated system of fares. So right now, if I want to go to Oakland and I want to go across the bay, and if I want to take Caltrain to BART, or if I take the Dumbarton bus over to BART on the other side of the bay, I pay a different amount, and there's no one path that can support that trip. And in regions with integrated systems, you can have the ability to have standardized pricing that would be the same regardless of the number of agencies and modes. Another feature that regions around the world have been moving toward is fare capping, so that if you, this is something that's really good for affordability, where you can take transit, and then when you reach the cap for the week or the month, then you don't pay more. I neglected to mention the simplest piece of fare integration, which is eliminating transfer charges, so that right now, when you go from a bus to a train, you pay twice, and a basic way of integrating fares is to eliminate transfer penalties. So, so in order to bring about this world, this may sound like science fiction, but I'll be about to describe some ways where it is not only not science fiction, but making significant progress. So this has been a initiative that Seamless Bay Area, which is a nonprofit, that for disclosure, I am a co-founder of this nonprofit. I double checked with the city attorney, and they said I could give this presentation because we are not, this body is not making the decision, and we're an advisory body. It's not a conflict of interest for me to make this presentation. And I co-founded this nonprofit with the goal of transforming the Bay Area's fragmented public transit into a world-class, unified, equitable, and widely used system by building a diverse movement for change and promoting policy reforms. And the reason that the evidence that this is not science fiction is that there has been some really significant progress in the last several years, where in terms of having integrated fares, back in 2019, there was a regional fare study started, and that is studying regionally integrated fares, and that is about to come out with some very good recommendations. I'll give you another example, by the way, which is that we just had, Nicholas was presenting, he works on transportation demand management for the city's initiative to do transportation demand management, which is a fancy word for giving people good alternatives to driving. There was a question with the city as an employer about whether it should continue a Caltrain pass, because a Caltrain pass serves a good number of employees, but not all of the employees, because some employees live someplace not served by Caltrain. So you have to choose, do I do a Caltrain pass or something else? And so this fare integration study is going to be shortly coming forward with recommendations that solve, that address some of these issues. Another thing that is happening now is that in response to COVID, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, which is the regional body that funds and oversees some aspects of transportation, convened a Blue Ribbon Transit Recovery Task Force with the goal of recovering the public transit system from the impacts of COVID. And they've been looking into the potential to have a network management entity for the Bay Area with the responsibility to ensure coordination. And that body is about to make its recommendations on June the 26th. And there's going to be a likely next step to do a business case study of these options to achieve that coordination. And that body is composed of people from business groups, labor groups, transit advocacy groups, equity groups, a variety of different stakeholders, including a member of the legislature who has brought forward a bill with the goal of advancing a seamless transit system. And that bill has become what they call in Sacramento, a 2-year bill, meaning that instead of getting passed this year, it would get passed next year, and it is waiting for the recommendations of this study in order to be able to implement these changes and put them into law. So the piece part of bringing about a seamless system have been making some significant progress with some really important milestones that are shortly forthcoming. And why has so much progress been made on an issue that had been, for a long time considered a pretty big challenge? There is an initiative called the Seamless Transit Principles. And this is an initiative. I'm going to scroll forward for a second. The Seamless Transit Principles are a set of 7 very common sense principles to guide decision makers, like run all Bay Area transit as one easy to use and accessible to all, align prices to be simple, fair, and affordable, connect effortlessly with other sustainable transportation, plan communities and transportation together, and prioritize the reforms to create a seamless network. And these seamless transit principles have been supported by a large and growing range of public bodies. So in San Mateo County alone, the city of Redwood City, San Mateo, Millbrae, Pacifica, and Half Moon Bay, and it's on the consent calendar in East Palo Alto next week, as well as elsewhere in the region, Fremont, Berkeley, El Cerrito, the Alameda County, the San Francisco County Transportation Authority, which is the same people as their Board of Supervisors, the Cities Association of Santa Clara County. There are many, many cities are supportive of this because, like us, they have this need for a working coordinated public transportation system, and each one alone can't achieve it. But by having the voices of these different organizations together, that has already helped and will help to move things forward. There's a couple of public transit agencies that have supported the seamless transit principles. The BART board has, the ferry agency has, interestingly enough, because ferries often require people to make connections in order to get to where the ferry is. And 38 nonprofit groups and businesses ranging from transit rider groups, business-related groups, community-based organizations, environmental groups, a really a wide range of organizations of different stripes are in support of this. And that is something that has helped in moving these initiatives forward, such that there are some important milestones that are approaching. And the support from these many cities and jurisdictions and agencies and groups and so on also shows up in polling. So this is only the most recent poll that happened to be polling about the language in that bill, and that showed 80-something to 90-something% support for coordinating public transportation systems to act as a seamless multimodal system. And it's not just this poll. It's this issue has been polled 3 or 4 times over the last couple of years, and really consistently. This is something that people, voters, is like really appealing to people. It's really common sense for people. And so that is helping to move things along. So, so I want to talk a little bit about the milestones, and then want to talk about the ask of this group, and then for the city of Menlo Park. So the milestones that are coming up, the draft recommendations for that FAIR study are coming forward. They're expected to surface on August 2nd. They're going to be reviewed by the FAIR Integration Task Force, which is composed of transit agency GMs. It's going to do a roadshow at transit agency boards, and there's going to be a decision made this fall. I mentioned that the Blue Ribbon Task Force is going to have its recommendations over the summer, to be followed by a business case study about the options. And there's some other piece parts that are moving forward, including a regional rail study and the state legislation that I had mentioned. So what can the city do? So the request to this body, if this body is interested and supportive, is to recommend to the city council to sign the seamless transit principles. And that does not commit the city to do any specific action. Any other specific action is a separate decision. It does align Menlo Park with these many other cities and agencies, saying this is something that is a popular goal amongst cities and organizations, so it shows that support. And it also plugs Menlo Park into a stream of information about these upcoming opportunities. So staff would get an email saying, like, here's this meeting at this regional body with this opportunity that then, separately the city could choose to or not choose to take an action about. And then in particular, in terms of the potential actions, one thing that is known to be coming up is the regional FAIR study recommendations. And so this is a recommendation to ask staff to review the regional FAIR study recommendations for potential comment, and for the city to take a position on the recommendations of that FAIR study. And just for yet another disclosure, I'm on the advisory body for the FAIR study, which is an offshoot of the NTC Policy Advisory Council. So that's a civic hat. And that's part of the reason why I know all of these details and think that this is really worth and has the potential of a benefit for the city. So with that, I'll be happy to take questions.
Yeah, so I am going to ask the commission members if there are any clarifying questions from the commission before we take public comment.
Yeah, I got a question. Does this whole concept try to integrate the mass transit with the with some of the private entities coming up, like an Uber or a Lyft, where you could coordinate a Lyft or some sort of ride to the transit station, transit across the bay, and then pick up your second last mile rideshare program? And is there a lot of those companies are starting to do cross-platform integration? And also another disclosure, I now work for one of the zero-emission transportation companies, not cars. But anyway, they're starting to go cross-platform, and it seems like a natural synergy to where the end user could just use the app on their phone to dial up a complete private public intermeshed, what's your optimum route? And I know that the private companies have pretty extensive, I'll call it system integration capabilities and incentive to do so. And so anyway, I just wonder if that could be an extra layer that might make this whole thing a little bit cleaner and a little bit less competitive between the public and private, and a little more like meshing together.
Yes, and so the setting of standards to integrate various different, first and last mile options and other pieces of the system is a logical thing. If there are regional standards to set, plugging in those private options is a good idea. It is not, in general, when regions go from a less coordinated to a more coordinated state, it tends to go stepwise and they don't do everything all at once. So a logical path would, might be to start by having these standards for the public transportation, and then add on the ability to set the standards for the additional options. This is something like, that I have heard with the nonprofit hat, that the private companies are supportive of generally supportive of this kind of standardization. Yes, I think it's a good idea, and it might not happen in step one, but I believe it's stepped on this path.
They might do it for you too, right? If you create a single lever, a single handle into the complete system, that's a lot better for them than having to independently code 28 of them. So you might just get that for free.
Yeah, and like one of the aspects of that bill was having standardized data feed for all of public transit, which is not yet fully consistent. So that's something that would help any other piece, to plug into.
Can we move to Commissioner Altman, who has a question?
Yeah, I just to kind of build off what John was saying. It looks like fair. You started with fair, simplicity, and fair, equity, and all that. Why starting with fair instead of convenience? Was there a trade-off there in terms of the first initiatives? Why not look for ease of access, ease of convenience, ease of getting from A to Z, rather than starting with the fair?
Mm-hmm. Definitely, the fares and schedules and the wayfinding signage is all part of the puzzle. The fare was studied separately, I think, partly because it is a barrier. There was a number of nonprofits had requested to the Metropolitan Transportation System had a contest in Plan Bay Area, its regional planning, and they asked community groups to make suggestions for things that should be included in Plan Bay Area. And then the things that seemed the most promising, they modeled and studied. And fare integration in this modeling won the grand prize of a change that would have the most transformative impact on ridership. So absolutely, yes, coordinated schedules and other ease of use is part of the picture. And the fare item was identified as something that would be, like a piece that would make a difference. And also something that has some, barriers to achieve. So studying it was something where that study could make some recommendations about, how to do it effectively.
Brian, when you said fair, did you mean F-A-R-E or did you mean F-A-I-R?
F-A-R-E, fair, money. Yeah.
Okay. I misunderstood your comment.
Yeah, sorry about that. It just seems like, it's hard to get from any point to any point with the existing system. And, I had to commute from Menlo Park to East Oakland for a bunch of years. And I tried taking every which way. And it took me two and a half hours, whether going through BART or going across the bay, that type of thing. And it just seems to me that there's, you may be able to address fare, or depending on how the question was asked, it may be a barrier, but ultimately it's just going to be convenience, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think the answer there is both. And in terms of the coordinating the routes and schedules, that is a key piece of what the network management entity would do. Because right now it's nobody's job to look at how many people go between the peninsula and the East Bay and how do you improve that whole route. Right now that planning is done by multiple different agencies, and no person has the no entity has responsibility for solving that problem. And so the Blue Ribbon Task Force Network Manager study is particularly studying how to create an entity that is responsible for owning that as a problem.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in for a sec because my job here is to get any clarifying questions from the commission before we take public comment. And that means that if J.K. Jensen, Jackie Cibrian, John Cromie, anyone here, Brian Altman, myself have questions, now's the time to ask. The question I have is really the timing of asking the commission to recommend to the council to sign the seamless transit principles, because as I understood the presentation, it seems like we're on this very intense period in the next 2 months where several different entities are handing down recommendations. I think you said the Metropolitan Transportation Commission was handing down recommendations on June 26th. Why wouldn't we wait for the next 6 to 8 weeks or so while we see these recommendations coming down from different boards that have studied this closely before we would make a recommendation to the council?
So the recommendation to council, the initial recommendation, isn't on a specific issue. It's to sign in general the seamless transit principles, which is saying this is a goal of the city council. And by having this be a goal of the city council, it would then orient the city towards potentially paying attention to these other issues as they come forward.
Well, what are the recommendations being handed down the next few months, and do they pertain to those issues?
So the fare study is one of these pieces,
right?
And the recommendations on that are expected to be made about the next step in October. The information about that is going to start to surface in August, but the city deciding we care about having a seamless system is a perennial thing. And by having Menlo Park show their voice of support along with the other cities, that is helpful with the entire process, upstream of the specific decisions that move this change forward incrementally.
I guess I see it a little bit differently in that I want to make sure that our timing is good for when we go to the council and recommend they do this. And I would think that if a commission is going to comment on the fare issue, that we would want to then, depending on what they say, what the recommendations they make, it seems to bolster our case to recommend to the state council, hey, you should be supporting this in principle, when they know the lay of the land. The only thing that jumped out at me when I looked at the principles, consistent mapping and signage sounds like a no-brainer. Real-time vehicle location data sounds like a no-brainer. But regional fares, do I feel comfortable saying to the city council, we should move to regional fares? I don't know what kind of impact that has on, the transportation budget or our ability to provide transportation from Menlo Park. I literally don't know, but that's a huge deal. And I want to make sure that this commission is credible and the recommendations we make, and maybe the studies and recommendations when we hand down the next few months will bolster our case and make the commission really pay attention. The council.
Yeah. So here's a rationale for going about this in the other order in terms of having a general policy first and then deciding whether to support a specific. So for example, the city has adopted a Vision Zero policy, that it wants to minimize injuries and deaths on the road. And that is upstream of making any specific decision about a sidewalk or a bike lane. But having a Vision Zero policy helps to orient the city council and the staff and the commission that this is the policy of the city. when it comes to approving any specific sidewalk or any specific bike lane, we need to make that decision separately. But first, we decide that it is our value that we want to minimize the injuries and deaths, and and that we would have as a value of having a convenient system. If the report comes out and it says that some particular recommendation isn't, like a specific isn't good, like we don't like this bike lane, we don't like this one recommendation in the FAIR study, we don't need to do that. But it's saying this is the policy, and like as a city that like we do not control the regional transit system, so having this as a policy where we're sharing our voices with others is helpful in having that as a policy upstream of the specific decision.
Yeah, and I can maybe jump in here as well as the chair and I had a brief discussion about this. I think one thing that we will also want to be clear about specifically tonight's recommendation is that we are simply looking toward the commission to see if this is something that the commission is interested in picking up. In order, I think to Vice Chair Cole's point about the timing, I think that's a great point. But that's not what tonight's about. Tonight is simply to see if the commission has a general desire to take this on, because in order for staff to work on anything, we would need the city council's approval and blessing. And as it's currently structured, this particular item is not. So if I would look at it from the standpoint that as a commission here, if the commission overall feels like this is something that is worth pursuing, not putting a promise on anything, it's just the idea of pursuing it, then your vote tonight would mean that we want to put it on our work plan. And subsequently, the work plan would then go to the city council for adoption. And at that moment in time is when we express to the city council that collectively we think this is a good idea that we want to pursue, and we would like the city council to maybe dedicate some resources to put towards it. If the recommendations that comes out of it is something that we want to further pursue. Now, at the end of the day, even if we voted yes tonight, even if it gets put onto our work plan and the city council decided that this is a great idea and adopt the our commission work plan, it might not amount to anything. We might then look at the recommendations and collectively, as Vice Chair Cole had mentioned, that maybe there's some ideas in there, but while the idea is great, but the actual execution or the actual recommendation is not something that we want to pursue, for whatever reason, cost, or the intensity of resources, then that essentially amounts to nothing. So I think I do want to kind of make that clarification that by agreeing, by voting yes tonight, the commission is saying that we believe that generally speaking, the resolution is a good idea, the overall approach is a good idea, and we would like to put it on a work plan so that we can go to the city council and say, city council, we believe this is a good idea, and we wish that maybe the city can dedicate some resources and review the recommendations that will be coming out. So there's kind of a two-step approach that we need to do, and then I think from a scheduling standpoint, if everything kind of pans out, if we vote yes subsequently for everything else, I think the timing wise would actually probably work out well, because then we still need to go to the city. We still need to adopt our work plan first. We still need to go to the city council to get their blessing, which is going to take at a minimum 2 months. So by the time that this all goes through, theoretically, we would have a set of recommendations that we can look at and say, and maybe do a little bit of a deep dive. Because again, for something that is not on the city council's work plan, we need to kind of go through a bit of a process, because ultimately they are the decision body. So I wanted to make sure that that's clear.
So Kevin, in response to that, would the resolution be tonight here then to put it on the work plan of the commission, or to we are all agreeing to then propose it to or to present something to the city council. Which one are we resolving on tonight?
Right. So by a yes vote tonight would mean two things. One is the resolution itself. Now, I think prior to the meeting, you all have a copy of the draft resolution, so that is going to be public record. So that's the first action. The second action is then to kind of acknowledge that there is this fair study that is being kind of developed and will be published soon, and that the commission would like the city council to dedicate some resources to look at this study and potentially look into the recommendations and see if they are if that's something that the city wants to pursue. Because and again, at the end of the day, we may look at the recommendations and simply say we don't agree with them, and therefore the city doesn't want to pursue anything out of that study, or it could be the opposite, or it could be a mixture of both. So, and one thing I do want to at least kind of emphasize here is that, and this is definitely a challenge as many commission within the city will realize. One of the things that if an item is not currently within the city's council's budget, and we would like the city council to take this on, sometimes it means something else has to come off for, because as you all know, with the adoption of the budget, we basically have our entire year planned out. So one of the more challenging conversation, assuming tonight's vote is yes, our next meeting will most likely need to involve something along the line of, well, if we do want city staff to dedicate, or if we want the city council to dedicate some staff resources on this, well, what comes off? And then that's usually the more difficult conversation to be had.
Okay,
and I just wanted to add into here that this is something that has emerged as a challenge for the city. So where the city as an employer was thinking about how do we reduce driving by employees, but you could only get a transit pass for one agency and not for like all of the transit that's available. And as we have, when we have a transportation demand management policy, and there might be housing developments or businesses that want to be able to encourage transit, but they have, only the choice to get a Samtrans pass or a Caltrain pass. This is a challenge that we have run into, and without really the ability to solve on our own. So this isn't a issue that's theoretical for the city. This is an issue that the city has encountered already.
That's that comment's very appreciated. I mean, it sounds like it is something, and it makes sense that it is something that has caused challenges for us. And the Bay Area is so integrated. I mean, I work at Apple and Cupertino, and people commute from all over the Bay Area, and I can see that this is something that could be really important in the long run. I think where I'm being such a new commissioner, I'm a bit challenged is, number one, on Kevin's point that if we put this on the agenda or the work plan, something has to come off. And I don't really know what that something is. So I feel like I'm kind of weighing it against a bit of an unknown. And maybe all the things that are on the work plan now were considered to be incredibly critical. And the other thing is, I guess to be completely honest, I'm a little puzzled with the timing, because if there is a regional fair study coming down and recommendations are coming down within a matter of weeks, it just feels like it gives us more information.
Then the issue is, I guess, so two things about that. Like, if we wait to adopt the policy until we have all of the information about the statistics, if we wait to approve a Vision Zero policy until we have the particular bike lane, we might not. So it's having the policy that says we're going to care about this kind of issue. And then in terms of staff saying, well, we might need to take something off of our plate, staff will be able to, look at the staff report that comes out from the FAIR study and say, hey, this is going to take somebody, like this is not like, we were talking earlier today about the bicycle and pedestrian undercrossing of the Caltrain tracks at Middle. That's something that takes a large portion of like one or more FTEs for many months and multiple years. Like reading a staff report from a regional body is a much, much, much smaller thing in scope. And staff will tell us, staff won't just say, you have told us to do it, and then, it's a pig in a poke. Oops, sorry, you will not get this middle undercrossing because we have decided to read the staff report. Staff will say, here's the size of this thing, and therefore here's this other thing that we will defer. So staff will be able to explain what that trade-off is.
Okay, well, I think now that we've had some discussion about it, maybe, Adina, why don't you just kind of frame for us again what we are voting on, and then we can move on to public comment and then ask about a vote for folks on the commission.
Okay, so the recommendation is for us to recommend to City Council to sign the seamless transit principles, which sets a general policy for the city, and will let city staff know about what the upcoming specifics are that the city may want to take a position on. And then secondly and separately, for staff to take a look at the regional FAIR study recommendations for potential comment and potential taking a position.
Okay. Any other clarifying questions from the commission before we move to public comment? Okay, Patrick, do we have any public comment on this item?
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'd just like to remind actually, it looks like we do, from Randy Avalos. You are now the public speaker.
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for time. Randy Avalos, District 5, lifelong commuter, commuting up to San Francisco and Oakland. I'm just jumped into this. I didn't really see this on the agenda for today, which is really confusing. So I'm not sure how the public had an opportunity to even know this was going to be a topic. Those are interested. But I'm also just a bit confused. It seems to be very broad. We're setting a goal, which is great, but then there's specifics. So it's kind of really hard to follow. Are we committing the city to different levels of governance? Are they beholden to the region, to a county? So it's very unclear from a public perspective. It's kind of hard to follow when I have nothing to read from a public perspective. So I'm just hoping some clarity a bit more on, I know you just spoke of what you're proposing, but it's still unclear from a public perspective. Is this general? Is this specific? What's the timing? Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment.
All right, and through the acting chair and staff, can I speak to the public commenter's question?
Yes.
So first of all, if the slides were, I know the slides were, I believe they were shared with commissioners, but if they were not posted, is that something that we can vote on, or do we need to bring it back and vote the next time because the slides weren't up before?
Kevin, do you know about that?
Right. So yeah, the slides unfortunately we were from a time standpoint, we're not able to make it prior to the publication of the minutes, but it will be, publication of the agenda, but it will be part of the minute for this meeting. With regard to the actual voting, the answer is so for tonight's voting, what the commission is committed on is that we would revisit this for the work plan discussion, and that is tentatively planned to be had at our next Complete Streets Commission meeting. So at that time, at our next meeting is when really the commission will be voting yes or no to this particular topic. So yes, there will be an opportunity so even if you decided to vote yes tonight, it simply means we will go ahead and put it on the work plan to be discussed at the next meeting. And at the next meeting, if you decided that no, this is not something that I'm comfortable voting on, then at that time you will still be able to cast your no vote on it as well. So hopefully that was clear.
Okay, great. So then the vote is just about including it in the queue potentially for the work plan. And then secondly, to the question that the member of the public raised, what we are recommending for consideration in the work plan is for the city council to support the seamless transit principles as a policy direction. And we are not making a recommendation to the city council to take any specific action about any of the specific items. It is as if we want to be putting a Vision Zero policy into our work plan, but we are not approving any particular sidewalk or bike lane. And I think the member of the public was asking, does this commit us to support any given bike lane or any given sidewalk? And the answer is no. It is just saying this is a policy orientation of the city. And that we want to consider having it in the work plan to have this be a policy orientation of the city.
Is the member of the public have any comments to that?
So thank you for calling back. Yes, I understand the policy, but I'm concerned that if we're committed to, say, a county level, and there's some county commissioners that the city might not agree with, are we beholden to the county? Like, what's the independence of the city?
Yeah, can I? So first of all, this doesn't commit the city to do anything, just like having a Vision Zero policy doesn't commit the city to do anything. And yes, it is absolutely true that in order to make a more convenient system, that does involve, the solutions involve multiple transit agencies and county transportation agencies and so on. It's very fragmented. That's part of the challenge. And so that is where cities with needs that are not being met by the current fragmented system, may choose to speak up and say, this is a need that we have. Historically, as a city, we've just looked at this system that isn't working well enough for us and say, well, it's out of our hands. And so the question is, do we want to consider, like where appropriate to speak up for what our needs are?
Anything else, Randy, before I make a comment?
Sorry, Vice Chair Cole, but just from a logistic standpoint, yeah, we typically let the speaker speak for the 3 minutes. And, yeah.
Okay, understood. I think my take on this is that, I think the public commenter made a very good point, which is that he didn't have the opportunity to see the slides. I'm actually quite interested in the public's viewpoint on this, and I wonder if we should just defer this to the next meeting, post the slides, and make sure that folks like Randy have an opportunity to ask questions. I think that's an important part of this process. And then we can also potentially combine the discussion with the discussion in the next meeting that you said was going to take place, Kevin, around the work plan. I think Adina's made some great points and raised some really important issues to our attention, but it seems like the slides should have gone up, and we can fix that and also talk about this in the context of the work plan. So that would be my recommendation. I guess that's my motion, is to defer this till the next meeting.
I'll second that motion.
I agree.
Okay.
All right, and I have a clarifying question to staff. So does that allow us at the next meeting to consider it for the work plan at that time?
I believe so. I think that's definitely enough instruction here that would allow us to do so at the next meeting.
So should we go ahead, Kevin? I think that I'm supposed to ask her right now a vote.
Yes. So I do have a motion at the table by Vice Chair Ko, and then a second by Commissioner Jensen. So for those that would like to vote yes to the motion, please raise your hand. Okay. So I believe I have 5 yes votes, including our chair. So great, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. And with that, I just wanted to also do a quick plug to our work plan. As I have mentioned a little bit earlier today during a discussion, that one of the things that we are trying to do each year, our commission, we have a work plan that we need to develop and get approved by the City Council. And with that in mind, that's what we plan to do at our next meeting. And this will be one of the items that will be brought up. And in addition to that, as I mentioned during my announcement, we have a bit, in addition to this particular item, there are potentially 2 more items that we could add to the work plan. One is for the evaluation of the Safe Route to School program. And then the other one is the evaluation of the NTMP process as a whole. So those are things that we'll be able to discuss at our next meeting as well. So definitely want to do a quick plug for that. So stay tuned. So with that, I guess I'll turn over the meeting back to the chair.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. And let's see. So the next item is we are to evaluate the commission subcommittee to support the City Council priorities. And we'll ask Kevin Chen to introduce the item.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. So this is typically a kind of a bookkeeping item here. So as you all know, we had a really good discussion at the last meeting about the charges and responsibilities of the subcommittees. And during that conversation, there were interests expressed by several commissioners. So I will go ahead and basically reiterate what I've heard from that meeting. And then of course, at the end, certainly open the floor up to any additional corrections or additions that you might want to add to that. So the first and foremost, we have the Climate Action Plan Subcommittee, which currently has a member of 1 by our Chair Levin, and Commissioner Jensen have expressed interest. We also have our Downtown Access and Parking Subcommittee, which currently has 1 member, Commissioner Baruzzi, at which Commissioner Altman have expressed interest. The third one is our Multimodal Metrics Subcommittee, which currently has 2 members, Commissioner Baruzzi and Chair Levin. And I believe Commissioner Altman had expressed interest as well. And then finally, the Safe Route to School Program Subcommittee, which currently has 3 members. We have Commissioner Baruzzi, Cibrian, and Lee, and Commissioner King had expressed interest. So out of the 4 that I stated, I'll be taking a vote tonight for the first 3 because Commissioner King is not here tonight. So we'll postpone that one to the next meeting. So essentially what I'm looking for is ultimately a motion and a second and a vote to add those members to the corresponding subcommittees I had just mentioned. So with that, I will go ahead and open the floor up for any feedbacks, corrections, or anything. So Chair, I see Commissioner Altman has her.
Is this the right time? I'd like to participate in the Transportation Master Plan.
Okay, great. So just for everyone's benefit, we have our Transportation Master Plans Implementation Subcommittee currently has 3 members, Commissioners Baruzzi, Sabrian, and Chair Levin. So Commissioner Altman would be the 4th member in this case. So anything else?
Yeah, Kevin, I was just going to ask if will there be an opportunity in the future if we choose that we want to engage with the subcommittee later on, we have more bandwidth and we'd like to take that on. Is that an option in future commission meetings?
Absolutely. Yeah. Anytime a commissioner wants to participate in another one or perhaps recuse him or herself from an existing subcommittee, all you have to do is raise that at one meeting, and then at the next meeting we'll agendize it and formalize that decision.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Cole.
Thank you. I would like to express interest in the Downtown Access and Parking Subcommittee.
Okay, great. And so that would be Vice Chair Cole. And Vice Chair Cole, are you comfortable if we vote that for tonight, or would you like more time to?
No,
fine. Okay. Great. Okay. So, not seeing any more hands. If I can just.
All right, the comments from members of the public on the subcommittees. I am not seeing any comments, any hands from members of the public. So can staff, does anyone have a motion to approve all of the subcommittees that we have talked about?
Would anyone like me to just repeat that before the motion, or?
Yes, I'll make the motion if you repeat it.
Sounds good. Great. Thank you very much. So in this case, we will add Commissioner Jensen to the Climate Action Plan Subcommittee. We'll add Commissioner Altman and Vice Chair Koh to the Downtown Access and Parking Subcommittee. We'll add Commissioner Altman to the Multimodal Metrics Subcommittee. And then finally, we'll add Commissioner Altman to the Transportation Master Plan Implementation Subcommittee.
Okay, I make that motion.
Okay. So we have Commissioner Sabrian making the motion. May I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Okay, great. Vice Chair Koh, second. So for those commissioners that would like to vote yes, if you can just have you raise your hand, that would be great. Awesome. That's unanimous. Great. Thank you very much. At this point, I'll return the meeting back to the chair.
All right. Let's see. So moving on to informational items, which are transmitted to the Commission and staff's effort to provide an update on matters of importance to the Commission. Informational items are not action items. However, a Commission staff member or member of the public may request to make a comment or ask a question on any of the information items. Can on F1 update on major project status, Kevin, are there any updates to provide?
Great, thank you very much, Madam Chair. If you could give me a second as I pull up my file here. There we go. So I do have a couple of quick updates for the Commission. First and foremost, I just for the benefit of the new commissioners, one of the projects that the city is currently working on is called the Belhaven Traffic Calming Plan. It is a kind of a citywide traffic calming plan for the Belhaven neighborhood. It was originated as a mitigation measure for the Facebook project, the Facebook expansion EIR project. And as a result of that, the staff, the city had led a consultant to evaluate and determine the condition of the cut through from essentially into the neighborhood, and had identify a few streets that were identified as cut-through routes, and those were Choco, Newbridge, and Ivy. And as a result of that, a few recommendations were made to for two primary reasons. One was in hope of slowing down cars. So 3 reasons actually: slowing down cars, discourage cut-through traffic, which typically, by hopefully slowing down the cars, reduce the timing that you're saving, and therefore no longer choosing the neighborhood as a cut-through. And then finally, it's just general safety for pedestrians, bikes, vehicles, etc. So as part of that recommendation, staff had proposed several improvements along those streets, and some of which, if you've driven by the neighborhood, you might have already seen, which is some additional striping along Choco between Hamilton and Ivy. You'll now see speed feedback signs, and those are essentially the signs that if you're driven up close to it, it'll tell you how fast you're going. Additionally, you might have seen some ballers at the corner intersections. So those are representations of a permanent bulb out that could be implemented there. And with bulb outs, typically those serve a couple main reasons. One is kind of just a general narrowing effect of the roadway. 2 is to reduce turning traffic, turning speed, but also reduce the crossing distance of the pedestrians, so they're not on the street as long. So if you're driven by the neighborhood, you'll see ballers that are currently along Newbridge. You'll see some ballers currently along Choco as well, and those are the temporary measures that we have installed in the neighborhood for a better part of maybe over a year now. And initially, the plan was to conduct a post study of those trial measures, and then just kind of see the general effect of those measures, and moving on to a permanent installation. Of course, COVID condition kind of curtails that plan. So instead, what we decided to do is that we would provide a survey to the neighborhood, and a survey to the entire neighborhood to solicit their feedback on just general feedback on those measures, and also whether or not they would like to see them be made permanent. And of course, we have also collected some data, volume data, and some selective speed data, just to be able to do a before and after comparison, recognizing that all this data are COVID condition data, so they may or may not be a good representation. Anyways, I just want to update the commission that the survey has been sent out to the neighborhood. We are periodically receiving some feedbacks. We do have a due date of July 23rd, so it's next Friday. So if you have any friends or neighbors or connections to the Belhaven neighborhood, I would greatly appreciate it if you can spread the message about the survey, and just generally let them know the survey and that their feedback are very much welcome, and will have a significant impact to the permanent installation itself. I do want to quickly highlight that I did say Ivy as one of the cut-through routes. However, Ivy is actually not our right-of-way. It belongs to the Public Utilities Commission. So we are coordinating with them to get their blessing on installing some bulb outs and other features as well. But unfortunately, due to the timing, we were not able to do any temporary trials. So if we do get their blessings and the blessing of the neighborhood, we'll go ahead and do them as a permanent installation. So that's sorry about that. I just wanted to provide some brief history for the new commissioners. So that's item number 1. Item number 2 is that some of you might know that we are working on sort of establishing a 15 miles per hour zone for all the schools around the city. So within the city boundary, both private and public facilities. So we do intend to just go back to the city council with some update in August. So definitely stay tuned for that. Additionally, being mentioned a couple of times is the Citywide Transportation Management Association feasibility study. So that's something that Nick, which you have been introduced to, is currently working on, and that will also be going to the city council sometime in August. So as soon as the dates are finalized and we have a published agenda, I'll make sure to share those with the commission as well. So with that, I will conclude my project updates.
thank you very much for those updates. Does anybody have any questions about any of those updates?
I just appreciate your flagging those things for us in proactively. Thank you. It's good to hear about them now.
All right. And any public comments on this item? Seeing none, we can move on to committee reports. And G1 from the Climate Action Plan Subcommittee, I do not have anything to report. G2, Downtown Access and Parking, Commissioner Baruzzi is absent. Multimodal metrics, nothing to report. G4, Multimodal Subcommittee, that was a presentation from today. Safe routes to school, Commissioner Seabrian, do you have any updates?
No, not that I know of. Am I still muted? No.
Okay. Transportation Master Plan Implementation Subcommittee. I think the thing I will call out on this one is that in approving the budget, City Council was supportive of the recommendation that we had made generally to prioritize the capital projects in the capital improvement plan that are implementing projects from the transportation master plan that improve safety and provide convenient alternatives to driving. And they were interested in, once the open hires had happened, potentially to get an update on how much staff was able to achieve and decide whether to do any additional resource actions to enable those TMP projects. And Kevin, is that an accurate representation of the City Council, not only decision, but orientation with that budget?
Yeah, I think that's generally correct. The definitely projects that have been identified, I think Middle Avenue, the Complete Street project being one of them as well. So I would say that's generally an accurate statement.
Okay, and then the other items that were in the capital improvement plan that were queued for the year included pedestrian improvements on El Camino Real and repaving and associated safety improvements on Middlefield. So moving on to G7, update from the Zero Emission Subcommittee. Does Commissioner Cromie have any updates?
So I was super excited to finally actually have something to update. And then your discussion about talking with the lawyers made me realize that I may now have a conflict of interest with the zero emissions thing because I work for a zero emissions transportation company now. So let me talk with the lawyers before I spout my mouth off inappropriately in a public forum. But hopefully there will actually start to be emissions on this subject in the near future.
All right. That is exciting. So any other subcommittee updates or public comments about the subcommittee updates? All right, seeing none, and it being a relatively civilized hour of 8:44, I would like to adjourn the meeting to our next meeting on the second Wednesday of August. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
Right.